outside the box standing by to join me is middle school teacher Octavio Hernandez. And I actually read about him in the New York Times. There was an article where he was really outspoken about what's going on with mental health and gun control. And I was so excited to have him join us on the show. He's here with us now. Hi there.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. I so appreciated you connecting with me. As I said, I read about you. I even saved the article. This was out of the New York Times, but in our local Orange County Register paper here in California. The article, "After Pandemic and Uvalde, Teachers Wonder What More," and you were quoted in the paper. Yeah, I mean, your anger, your concern really resonated with me.
So my biggest concern, of course, is also a lot of where I live. There is a very pro-gun area, so I just didn't want that whole chant again around, teachers should carry. They don't even trust us with books. Our county was the county that they were fighting for the books to get banned. They actually did get, our superintendent had to pull 18 books, and they had to get overlooked just because there was a group of parents that got together and said that these books were, you know, inappropriate for high schoolers. So we literally came off of that, and now we're gonna come off of this. And I know I already see it with some people asking what teachers should carry, and it's just you're adding more problems.
You are.
And you're fixating on solving a symptom, not the actual cause.
Mhm.
And what keeps happening, I believe, we keep putting band-aids
Yes.
instead of curing the actual disease. And that's the biggest problem I can see. And also, what teachers are asking us to do even more. They don't understand what we're going through right now. I mean, we literally had this conversation with our fellow teachers that, they're still hanging on, and they're like, well, we got to do what we can. I go, you don't understand. As teachers, more and more teachers quit. We have to carry more of the load for more
Right.
students, bigger
Yes.
classes, and we're going to come to the point where we can't actually teach. And what I mean by just teach is, to me, teaching is more than just a subject area. We're pillars in the community of education, of society. We help, I hope the parents trust us to guide the kids in doing the right thing for themselves.
Yes.
And this is what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And when you start adding something as dangerous as "where is my gun" in the classroom, I start to already get upset, and I get angry because they can't trust us with books, but they
Right.
can trust us with a gun. And it
Yeah.
just infuriates me
Of
because
course.
we keep adding. What else are we supposed to do?
I know. Are you going to look like an airport with scanners? I mean, and then
Well,
you're only increasing the anxiety and fear of the students under that school roof.
well, if I wanted to become a police officer, I would have became a police officer. But I wanted to teach,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
hate well, you can do this to defend yourself. How about I shouldn't have to defend myself in a school
Yes.
where children go? The safest place that it's supposed to be, I'm actually supposed to be the most frightened to be at.
Exactly.
Like, that is supposed to be the safest environment for a student, for their
Hmm.
minds, for their well-being, for their social skills.
Yes.
And now it has become the most dangerous place for them to be outside of driving in the car, because it happens so often that now people are just like, well, let's do something to protect ourselves rather than actual take our medicine. And let's do something about guns. Let's do
Yeah.
something about mental health, because it's obviously that there is no mental health, you know,
Right.
issues. Most of these people doing this are post-teens.
Right. I mean, when I saw the age of the shooter in Uvalde, I thought, okay, what's his background? What's his backstory? What kind of relationship with the parents? What was going on with him? And I saw that this was posted on Twitter. ABC News interviewed some students, and they said two things. They were frightened of him. Well, they didn't necessarily do anything with that information. So maybe there's a training and education component that's missing in schools, that if you see something, do something, and maybe it's anonymous, but you should do something with information that's alarming. And number two, they said he came to school with marks on his face, and when asked, he said, "Oh, I like the way it looks." So again, pieces of information that nothing was done with, or if it was, it just didn't get escalated to the right person. Yes, there's a gun control issue, but it's really at the root of it, a mental health issue.
That the mental health part, it's gonna get even worse in my opinion. Um, I see it. I see it. The whole classroom. You can tell the kids that it's a change in mindset. I think not mindset, energy. I can't explain it. These last 2 years, you can see there's a cloud almost over the classroom, right? Like these kids are foggy. Like what's going on? Like we're supposed to have answers for them, right? And I think right now, even we don't have answers to what's going on: inflation, war, epidemic, civil disobedience everywhere.
Yeah.
These kids are going through this, and their parents are going through it as well. And their parents are going through crisis. And I can't imagine seeing a kid and seeing your parents have, mental health issues right now. And it's coming out more and more. And children, you look up to your parents and they're supposed to have all the answers. And when you look at your parents and you see they're as messed up as you are feeling,
Right.
I,
Well,
you know,
let's unpack that for a second, because in the more and more people I talk to about my book, you've got COVID divorce, you've got COVID loss from death or economic factors. You're losing your jobs. Millions of people lost their job. I think it was over 40 million at one point.
mhm.
Everything. You could just fill in the blank with COVID, everything, right? And so there's COVID abuse, there's food insecurity, there's tremendous mental illness. I mean, how do you think we were in a mental health crisis before the pandemic, before March 2020? It seems to me that COVID only impacted and enhanced what was already growing. And now we're in a mental health pandemic.
So I believe the mentality of the American dream of working for everything that you want, I think people don't realize that you mostly have to sacrifice a lot of things you love to achieve your goals. And that in itself makes us alienate ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like to be successful, you have to, right? That is the American dream. But now you add a new way of communicating through social media. So you're also disconnecting. So if we're telling you to be successful, you have to disconnect. You have to work hard and, make that a priority. But if we disconnect from our friends and our
Family.
our family, then what is the purpose of it? I think we start realizing, so I think you're right about we were already in a crisis mentally before because of just the way our system is made. We're meant to be social media, and if you want to be independent, you got to go all out. You got to sacrifice everything. Like that's the power of success, right?
But
So
hold on a second.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I want to interject. What are we trying to prove? Because is it that we have trauma in our childhood and now we're adults and we feel like we just have to go, 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 and we're trying to prove something, and
we keep ourselves busy, right? So when
right.
moment COVID hit, everybody started realizing, what's the purpose of my life?
Yes. Yes.
Why am I here? Like, oh my God, I've been working. That's why you see this giant migration of people from, it cracks me up. All these, they're saying, oh, people from San Francisco, Dallas, New York, they're all moving down to Florida because it's cheaper. Yeah, that's where the money was. And they did the rat chase. They worked so hard, and they're like, I'm done.
Right.
Let me move to Florida, buy a nice little house, stay close to my kids. I met someone from executive in soccer. The mother worked for 20 something years, corporate, like high level corporate. And she realized, my kids are grown up. I miss them. I miss that, all that.
Yeah.
So I think COVID, and this is what I meant, our mentality of always going gun ho. That's the
Yes.
only way to America. You got to work hard. And all of a sudden you hit the brakes on that. And we have to come to terms with our lives.
Yes.
Am I happy with my partner? Am I happy with my life? Am I happy with my career?
Yeah.
Is money really everything? Because we saw so many people die from COVID.
That's right.
Like no matter how much money you had, it didn't matter. If you were sick.
Yes.
At the beginning of COVID, everybody that got it you had to be somebody really, really important to get some kind of good treatment at the beginning. Yeah. So I think that made a lot of people question their life. And it just brought the mental health into like, oh my God, am I happily married? Am I happy being a stay-at-home mom? I think that's
Yes.
what happened. Am I happy being a traveling, father, one student? And this is the one that made me realize I can't do it. No matter how amazing of a teacher or how fun of a teacher I can be or how much caring of a teacher, I realized that no. So I always try. I try the nice way. I try the mean way. I try the tough way. I try calling home. And there's so, I try a different way to connect with the kids.
Okay.
And this girl came from a affluent family. No major issues that I can see. But by the end of the year, she started working, started helping kids, tutoring other kids, helping. I'm like, man, so I pulled her aside and I said, hey, let me ask you a question. What was it that I did that made you change? And she goes, oh, it wasn't you.
You can't take credit.
Talk about an ego check, right? Like, she's like, oh, it wasn't you.
Okay.
I'm like, oh, well, I'm like, okay, so what was it? She said, my father decided to come back for summer. He's going to quit his job.
Oh.
And that I can live with him for the summer. And he's not going to much, and he's going to stay at home more. All this time, I worked so hard. And all this little girl wanted was to spend more time with her father.
Dad. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when it started. Like, okay, I got to realize no matter how amazing or how friendly or how much I try of it, sometimes
it's not you.
It's not me.
Right.
And I needed that for myself too, because there were times when I beat myself up.
Yeah.
Because I would treat these kids, I would feel like they're my own children. If they did something bad, if they got suspended after I just had a conversation about, listen, don't get in trouble. You got a month left of school.
Yes.
I turn around a period later and the kid gets in a fight. And it's like, it eats you alive, right?
But let me just say that you have compassion and you're a great listener. And some of these kids, I'm sure you're the only person they can talk to. Maybe they can't talk to their parents.
There's two of us in my school. I'm like the tough. They call me the tough dad, and the other one's the softer dad. He's more of a. They can tell him all the stuff that's really heartbreaking, and with me, I'm the one that they have like a tough issue. Like, what do I do? How do I get ahead? He's more the listener. I'm more of like the problem solver. So they'll come to me. It's like, how do I handle this? My parents. So I'll give you a perfect example. This is why I became so outspoken also with my students about the Don't Say Gay bill. I've had 3 kids, actually 4, tell me they're gay before anyone else. Okay. They came up before anyone. The one that struck me the most was at the end of COVID last year. Was it the end of COVID? So this girl, always dressed in dark, very goth. And I tell her, your parents, just out of nowhere, I'm like, your parents let you dress like that? Because she doesn't seem that type. And she said, no, my parents are very conservative. They think I read the Bible every day. I sit, they come in my room and they think I'm reading the Bible and I'm actually listening to like heavy metal music. Yeah, so she's got her Bible open on her desk. She's listening to heavy metal music. And I'm like, what about your clothes? She goes, oh, I changed in the bus. So then I'm like, oh, wow. So your parents are, really strict. They don't even let you. She's like, oh, yeah, they don't know. So then one day I found out she has a girlfriend. I'm like, wait a minute. She goes, I'm gay. She goes, please don't tell my parents. They won't even. I'm like, wait a minute. Aren't your parents? She goes, they'll never know. They know that like they already threatened to send me away to all girls school. And she has to hide this. And then I find out, I'm like, okay, well, listen, you have to understand. And I have become more of a transitional piece or communication piece between my students and their parents, because I explained to them, listen, I grew up very homophobic. I grew up in a Catholic, extremely homophobic household. My cousin at 12 or 13 came out and we treated him horrible. My family was terrible. My cousin, his sister and his mom were very supportive, but the rest of us, we weren't supportive at all. And, he went through a lot. As I started reaching out to him, as we get older, you get older, you kind of mature more and you realize like that kind of thinking is not.
Did you apologize?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we reached out to him. He's actually transgender.
Okay.
Now, so she changed transgender. So we all like accept her now. We all like, show her support.
Good.
But I grew up seeing how bad we treated him and when he was, as a gay child. And now I see my students and I understand that happens at home still.
Yeah.
So I change. I tell my students the story. you know, a lot of my gang stuff, so they understand, like, guys, I switched my mindset, but I had to grow. And you
Yes.
have to understand, if your whole life you've been taught that being gay is wrong, you're going to go to hell. Your whole life you're being taught this from a child. As you get older, and all of a sudden you realize, like, wait a minute, you know, maybe there's something wrong, or they feel for their child. They think their kid's going to go to hell, or they fear this lifestyle. They don't realize. And I become like a buffer. I'm like, give them time.
Yeah.
Let them know people. Let them, you know, show them it's okay. And I have
Right.
become a buffer
That's
where
amazing.
there is a parent. I can't go too much detail because I don't
No,
want any.
don't share
Yeah,
anybody's name or
yeah,
anything.
no, not even names, but
Yeah.
they were but they
Fine.
changed their mindset. This was like some of the first parents that that was the first child that came out to me that she was openly gay, or
Yeah.
she was gay, and she didn't tell her parents. Again, conservative, but their parents changed their mindset on this now, and now
Good.
they actually have stickers that say, "Just because I grew doesn't make me a hypocrite."
Mm.
So I was able to become a little buffer between, right, to just
Good.
ease the kids, because the kids sometimes want to react in a different way.
Right.
And I tell them, you got to be patient with them. It's not easy. You
Yes.
know, they completely different way. This is the first time in history we have 5 generations living together. Never, I mean,
5.
five, we have the greatest generation still alive.
Mm-hmm.
We have boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, then
Mm-hmm.
what? Generation Alpha. Like,
Alpha. Yeah.
so we have, and it's such a different group. And you know, thank God I'm teaching, because it has allowed me to see that society does change every 4 or 5 years,
Yes.
because
Yes.
the kids now are completely different than the kids 4 years ago. And
Definitely.
COVID had something to do with it. Even my son is like, Dad, there's 2 years of school that I didn't care.
Exactly.
I was online. Like, I didn't care.
Mhm.
Nobody cared. So all these kids are behind. And I push my students. I push my honor students, and I tell them, no, this is the time you need to strike, because when everybody else is using it as an excuse, if you push through right now, you push ahead and you succeed when everybody else is like, well, COVID, well, that, but you grind through this tough time. And I'm not telling
Mhm.
you it's not easy,
Right.
but you make it through. You guys will be so far ahead of all these other kids.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but in life, you're going to get a jump start on them, because it's tough and you fought through it. That's sometimes in life is not fair.
Well, it is a self-esteem boost if they can
Yeah,
fight
it is.
through it. Let's face it. I think it's incredible that you are a sounding board and a confidant, because not everyone can talk to their parents. I remember a family relative saying that homosexuality was a mental illness, and I would just gag every time I heard that, until I started speaking up and saying, "Oh, you're completely wrong." And you're one thing that's interesting with social media is that I feel that more students can be themselves because more people are themselves on social media. So they see themselves in these people that they don't even know half the time on social media, right? On Instagram, TikTok.
Mhm.
So I do admire Gen Z in that they're outspoken about mental health. And whereas, our generation would not be, we would not say, oh, we need a mental health day years ago, right? We would just suck it up. Yeah, I know. Uh,
Uh,
One thing I want to bring up, which is always bothered me, is that in schools we adopted STEM and STEAM, but mental health is not a priority as it should be in the curriculum, nor are preventative measures like, I mean, yes, some organizations are doing this. They're bringing people in to speak about this, but across the board, there's no standard for peer-to-peer preventative programming.
so we
Sometimes
have here social and emotional learning.
it's great.
That's what they were trying to get rid of, and that's what made me, on the CNN interview,
Wait,
like,
what are you trying to get rid of?
no, that's what they were trying to, social and emotional learning. They were saying that teachers are telling students how to be in touch with their
Oh,
feelings. It's about knowing how to control those emotions.
yeah.
Um, this next generation of sixth graders, middle schoolers,
Mhm.
let me tell you, because they missed fourth and fifth grade of actual structure.
Yeah. Milestones and yep.
Yeah, so now they're going to middle school with no foundation of a social filter,
Yeah.
uh, how to behave. And because think about it, when you're like in second, third grade, people, you still get away with stuff because they're kids. Oh,
Yeah.
they're still little kids. But fourth and fifth, that's when they start getting disciplined.
Yes.
Like, hey, you're not supposed to, you're going to get suspended. They didn't have that. So our sixth graders, and I talk to a lot of teachers across the board, sixth graders right now, and because they don't have that emotional learning, how to behave, how to discipline. So now they don't want us to have any kind of, it's not just mental, just emotional, which is, I mean, it is mental. In my classroom, I have these conversations. I tell my students, if I were to go into any kind of working field right now, it'd be three: engineering, medical, or counseling, mental health counseling.
Yes.
Because I see it across the board. Everybody's starting to accept that mental health just as important as
Oh, we lost you.
sorry,
It's
there
okay.
you go.
You're starting to see across the board that mental health.
It's just as important as physical health.
Yeah.
And what I tell my students, because I always talk about seeing a therapist and seeing a counselor, I tell them I see somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's good to talk to somebody. It's not even
Right.
about you're mentally broken. It's that sometimes your friends aren't there to listen, and they're tired too.
Yes.
So one that's not going to be objective, that doesn't know how that doesn't have any previous conceptions of who you are and your personality, and is just going to listen to you and help guide you. And I asked them, if someone broke their leg, would you be upset that they went to a doctor? Would you make fun of them for seeing a doctor because they broke their leg? No. So why would you make fun of anyone?
Yes.
Because they need counseling right now, because they're going through something traumatic.
Right.
And when I say that, then they all are like, maybe they saw their parents in the hospital for a month. Maybe they've seen their parents get divorced, their grandma passed away, their little brother, little sister sick, and everybody's just like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah. So those issues,
Yeah.
it's okay to talk to them, guys. Like, I grew up, and I bring it up in every class. I bring it up in all my meetings, and you're right. It should be talked about more, or a career being, I don't want to say promoted.
Well, let me reinforce this or mention this. So I feel that there needs to be policy changes, because teachers and counselors and other staff members, there was no prep for going online. It was like, okay, tomorrow or the next week, we're online. And the magnitude of work and stress, that's an understatement, that all of you had gone through is unbelievable. As you said, people have left the profession. I feel that there needs to be some changes now, not in a few years, to how schools teach about mental health and where you prioritize this. Because yes, you can push them to do well and get into a great college, but if they're not mentally strong and skilled in self-care, what happens when they go to college?
You're absolutely right. My students, so the first time I taught middle school, I had the honors kids. They know that I push, but they also give me the kids that have behavioral problems, because they know I get along. I try to connect with all my age groups, or all my social status children. But my honors kids, I push them. And then I tell them, but you need to know when to shut it down. Like, there is times, guys, if you're mentally exhausted, shut it off.
Yes.
It's just school.
Yeah.
There's many things in life. Yes, that's your goal, but it's not everything in life.
Yes.
It's not everything. Success. And so one of my students, because you're talking about mental health and how to promote it, and the problem we have with mental health is, I think a lot of people, mental health, kind of, sometimes people think that it's against capitalism or against that self fulfilling, like, you got to achieve the greatest thing, because mental health sometimes says it's okay. You don't need to be successful in everything in life.
Right.
Like, okay to just be you and enjoy life sometimes.
Yes.
And it goes against our values of work, fight. And mental health now has to be introduced in the classroom. And the thing is how do we introduce it? Because my kids, I'm still learning.
Well, there's a lot of ways to introduce it.
And but I talked about it. Like, I talked to them about, like, why it affects me, and why I choose mental, to see someone, to make it okay for them too.
Do you know what's interesting too, is some people, even adults, have said to me, they don't really clearly know what it means to talk about mental health, which is a really good point.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to do some activities with students where I actually get them to brainstorm even on a big whiteboard, like, what does mental health mean to them? Because they may not have the clarity for that. But when you think about it, the whole point of this too is taking care of themselves now and through adulthood, right? Having good habits, mental, physical, emotional, maybe spiritual health, but knowing what to do when things don't go well. Because in life, there's constant curveballs. There's joy, and then there's disappointment. There's extreme happiness, and then there's loss. So we've experienced the whole 9 yards the past couple years. But if you have these skills, it just makes you a little bit more resilient for dealing with the ups and downs in life. Because someone said, talk about the keys to success. Really? Being able to fall down and get up and on repeat.
So that's one of my students. We talk about these life lessons, and one of my students, because I talk about everything in my classroom. I mean, we talk about science, we talk about politics, we talk about history, we talk about women's rights, the history of immigration in my country. We talk about math too. Even my students say, how in the world do we pass these standardized tests, the EOC, which is a very difficult test to pass? And my classes have about a 93% passing rating.
92?
Yeah, it's for the last 3 years.
I'm not a test taker, so I would have struggled.
Well, most of the state average is the 62% of the kids pass, 62 to 60. But in my school, because I'm the only one teaching 90, and they're in shock because they're like, dude, you only teach Mr. Hernandez for like 25 minutes. The rest of the time we're talking about life or something else.
Yes.
It's more than life than math. I love math.
Yes.
But I want to teach you guys how to think. And nothing, I love when a kid comes back and like, oh, I looked up what you said, Mr. Hernandez. Yeah. You're right. And then they start going more into the rabbit hole. And I'm like, yes. And we start talking about it for like 10, 15 minutes. And that happens every class. And I love it. I love when they have their own critical thinking, and they have their own questions more than just what the book gives them. And that's life is about learning. And it's more than just math. It's mental, social skills. And I tell them my stories. Man, it's like the time that it's so hard to explain to kids when you grow up, always providing, always giving, because they see me as a father. Mm-hmm. When I got separated, my mother, and I called my mother for the first time, and like I told her, she was the first one I told, hey, Mom, I'm gonna get separated. Mm-hmm. I was 19. And she's like, you sure? I'm like, yeah, I can't do it. I don't want my kids to see this. This is not a healthy, this is not a healthy marriage. Like, that's not how they're going to grow up.
Okay.
But she asked me, she said, okay, well, you need to take care of yourself first. That's the first thing she said to me. And I broke down crying.
Yeah.
Because I told her, I don't know what that means.
Wow.
What does that mean, self-care? Because every time I try to do something for myself, I feel guilty.
Really?
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean,
like it feels selfish?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like if I spend any money over $20 to $50 on me, I'm just like,
where does that come from?
I want to say that was so what I've been reading, or with the mental health help that I've gotten, it's codependency, and you want to please people.
Yeah.
And you want to make people happy. My father left me when I was 9. The last image I had my father, and he had another family.
Wow.
The image that I had, my father, we moved here from Mexico. He abandoned us. And he had another family in Mexico. But I didn't know any of this. I was 8 years old. And the last time we were in the apartment and my older brother wouldn't open the door. He was standing in front of the door, blocking my other brother and my sister from opening the door because my mother had called and said, don't let him in the house. And I'm just looking through the glass door and I'm like, my dad's knocking. My brothers aren't letting him in. What's going on? And that was the last time I saw him. He turned around and walked away. And the reason my brother wouldn't let him in is all he was trying to do was take the VCR and the Nintendo back to the other family.
How old are you? How old are you? 8.
So that was the last time I saw my father. My mother remarried, stepfather.
Yeah.
My stepfather kicked my older brother out at 15 with a baby. My older brother got kicked at 13.
With a baby? He had a baby?
Yeah, he had a little girl.
At 15.
Yeah. He got his girlfriend pregnant at 15. He was 15. My older brother got kicked out at 13. my sister said, well, he's going, I'm going. So they moved to Mexico at 13 years old and 14 years old with no parents because my father wasn't there, but he didn't care anyways. So I kind of grew up independent, not.
Kinda.
Yeah, I've been working since I was 13. I'm self, so it's hard for me, to depend on anyone.
Yeah.
That's extremely difficult to have
Right.
any kind
But you
of,
also are an extremely empathetic person. When you see pain in your students, you want to
oh,
help.
it hurts.
It crushes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that. And so one of the reasons I became a teacher, I was always told by my friends, you're one of the smartest guys I know. Why aren't you an engineer? Everybody has always told me that since, I knew how to multiply and read when I was 4 years old.
Whoa.
I skipped 2 grades. I graduated 2 years younger than all my friends, but I didn't have that parental support. And all my friends always wondered why. I'm like, you have no idea, like, what my house was like. So now I'm getting older and I'm telling my story to other adults. They're like, this ain't real. How are you normal? How are you, your brothers? My brother's an engineer. I'm a teacher. My other brother's an engineer. Like, how did you guys survive that? And I used to think that was the normal for everybody.
Yes, that's what happens when you live with that. You do think it's normal.
You think everybody has. So
Yeah.
some of the kids, when they hear, they're like, Mr. Hernandez, you grew up like that? I'm like, yeah. And like, and you came out okay? I'm like, it wasn't easy, buddy. It's
Right.
like, I look back and I should be in jail or dead. Like,
Yeah.
you grew up on your own.
Yes.
But I feel like those trials and tribulations is what has allowed me to be, matter of fact, in this very, very moment with you, sharing my experiences, because I've gone through them and I survived them. B, I'm outspoken because I don't want them to happen to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want, my reason I became a teacher, part of it, no, not one teacher ever pulled me aside. And because I used to pass tests like nothing. I was just a troublemaker. And they knew I was smart. They knew they would ask me for honor classes. They're like, why don't you, but then I thought about it, I'm like, why didn't they take more interest in me?
Yeah.
And I know it's not their job, or I might be asking too much, but I always wonder what would have happened if a teacher would have just maybe took me under the wing a little bit. Not even, just a little support. Hey, have you thought about going?
Yeah, like to mentor you.
Yeah, because that's what I do. I tell them, listen, I have a real troubled kid where I tried, and he's just, I'm like, what do you want to do after your high school? Are you going to drop out? Well, that's my plan. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to go get a GED? Because you can't get a license without the GED. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. See, if you're going to go that path, because I'm telling you, son, not everybody's meant for college, but you should at least get a high school diploma. So I tried.
Excuse me, you can't get a license without a GED?
Yeah, in the state of Florida.
A driver's license if you don't have a GED?
You're underage, yeah. If you're under 18.
Very interesting.
That's what I think 16 or 17.
That's a good incentive to finish.
It is to finish school.
Yeah.
It is a good incentive to finish school. So we try that. But I try to mentor these kids in many different ways, and nobody ever, my students have, I will show you a lot of the letters they write me. I have in my room, and they tell me things like that, thank you for pushing me. Thank you for mentoring me. Yeah. Thank you for being supportive. And like, for example, the new Marvel movie's coming out about this Muslim girl. And I'm like, yeah, you guys see this? It's a new girl and she's Muslim, and they're showing her praying and they're showing her all that. And most of the kids are like, what? And then a couple Muslim kids are like, all right, let's go.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like, guys, that's what representation means.
Yes. Okay. So I have to say this. I don't mean to interrupt, but you're making me think of something. You instill a love of learning in them. Yes. Which is key, and a growth mindset, which they will take with them forever. Because when they took you, I want to backtrack. You talked about math, but everything you're saying, this love of learning, you're opening their eyes up to other things. And so outside of your classroom, they're still thinking of you. Very cool.
I asked them, don't you guys, because back to the American mentality and the mental health, right? One of my students one day asked me, Mr. Hernandez, not trying to offend you. You know so much. You're probably the smartest guy I know.
Oh.
Why aren't you successful?
They said that?
Yeah. So I said, wait a minute. And everyone's like, whoa. I said, what does success mean to you?
What is success? Yeah.
What is success? And she's like, well, because she knows how much, because I'm always like a union member, and I'm always, they hear me arguing about us fighting for pay, and how we're 47th in the state, and how supposedly we have the best, the fourth largest economy in the country, 11th in the world, and we're 47th in pay for teachers. So they always hear me, arguing about how little we get paid. And she said, well, teachers don't get paid. My aunt's a doctor, and she's a dentist, and she makes so much money. I said, well, what's success? Like, what do you mean? Like, what's the definition? Let's say right now, what would you define success?
Yeah.
So because the three richest people I know have been divorced 2 times. They rarely see their kids.
Exactly.
They're never home. Like, that's the sacrifice you have to make.
It's not materialism that makes you happy.
And I tell them my story with my father, and that he left me when I was 9 or 8. And I tell them, he was a terrible father, abusive, everything, drunk, everything you could think of.
Yeah.
And I tell them, what makes me mad though? It's not that what he did, it's the fact that he didn't leave me good memories.
Yeah.
I wish I can go back and think of the good that I had, but I don't have any. My older brother does, because it was different.
Yes.
But I couldn't.
Yes.
I caught the hell of everything. So I never had any good memories for me to what do you call it? Rely on.
Yeah, reflect on.
So when I became a father, I said, I'm gonna be there no matter what. Because if something happens to me tomorrow, I want my children to look back and say, my dad was there.
Yeah.
So I've been to every practice. I've been to every soccer game. School has allowed me, being a teacher has allowed me to always be with my children. And I tell them, my friends, we always talk about this conversation. What's more important, family or money? But like, family time, because you can't have both. If you're at home, you're not making money. And if you're making money, you're not at home. So you have to balance that fact, right? Every parent. And my friend and I, he's very successful. And the day I realized that I was doing a good thing, I was with my son. I was at his house, and my older son came up to me, gave me a hug and kissed. I love you, Dad, and just walked away. And my friend goes, I wish I had that relationship with my son. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, okay, I'm doing the right thing, because he might have the house, he might have the car, everything.
But you have watered that and grown that and fertilized that and given that your 100%.
Yeah. So, but I tell him, then we had this discussion. No matter how much money you make, you can never buy back the past.
Right.
And he said, yes, but you have to have money to prepare for the future. So there is a balance, right? And I tell my students, so I've been with my kids for every soccer practice, every game. And I walked them to school from kindergarten to 8th grade.
Wow.
Now they're in high school. They're going to leave me anyways. How it is. He's already asking for the car.
Well, yes, they're going to leave you, but they are going to circle back, and you are going to be imprinted in their behaviors and their thoughts.
So one of the things that I didn't want to pursue this career in, like, I want to say activism. And one of the things about being divorced is allowed me to do more, be out there more, not having to, marriage is a little difficult when you're chasing your goals. So now that I can chase my goals, they can see what it's like to actually chase something you want to pursue. And I want to be an activist for students to be more involved for mental health.
Good.
For changing the school system. I believe mental health coding should be part of our language. Like, it should be part of the educational system.
Yes.
Not just if you want to go this way, you can go this. Or mental health, if you need help, there it is. No, it should be part of the discussion, how to understand behavior. Because I'll give you a perfect example. We were at the graduating ceremony, and there's this little kid, like about 1-year-old, 2-year-old, just crying. And the parents are like, it's okay, don't cry. And I walked by and I picked up this trick that if you make them touch like any part of their body, if you activate their motor skills, they have to stop crying.
So you took their finger and touched their nose?
No, so I told him, the kid's crying. I go, hey, you got something on your nose? What's wrong with your nose? You okay? And he's like, what? And he stops crying. And the parents just look at me, because he instantly stopped crying. He's just like, he just stopped crying. I go, do it again. And they just looked at me like, what are you, the baby whisperer?
You are.
There's this trick that basically the part of the brain that's emotional that's making them cry, and the part of the motor skills, they can't work at the same time.
Wow.
So if you turn on their motor skills, their emotional skills shut off. And the kid just instantly, and both parents just looked at me, and I'm like, but see, that's education.
Right. But you also, I mean, such a great diversion, and you taught the parents something.
But so I'm saying that's it taught. I educated myself because
Mhm.
most parents like stop, 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 stop,
Yeah,
take it aside. Well, you know, or if they're at home, they shake the baby. That's what they talk about, shaking the
they
baby.
shake the
Oh,
baby.
you've never seen that? And like they actually
I've
have,
heard of it. I've never done it.
but no, but I'm saying, but like that's why they actually have like ads tell young parents don't shake the baby because their brains,
The neck, the head, or
well,
no.
the baby won't stop crying. I mean,
Oh
that's when you
God, that's
put them in the microwave, they put them in the oven. These, oh my God, you haven't heard all these,
no. I'm
these
glad
social,
I had didn't. No.
well, I talked to a lot of the, like the teachers with the ESE, that include children with disabilities and mental health and things like this, that, you know, extreme. Um, and they tell me some of these stories and I'm like, oh my goodness, like you realize why these kids are, you know, we had a student that got, like, he was about to get in a fight, but they respect me, right? So they know I don't curse at them. I don't, you know, but when I get mad, they're like, oh, he's mad. Let's listen to him.
Get out of his way.
Yeah, they just, I give him with the look, just like, here he comes. So there was a student, he wasn't mine, but he knows through everybody, hey, you know, it's Hernandez. You listen to Hernandez, don't,
Mhm.
you know, because he's cool,
Yeah.
he's laid back, yo. And he got in a fight, and I just looked at him, I go, why? Oh, he said something. Was it worth it? Right? And he kind of stopped. Everybody else he was trying to push off. When I walked by, he stopped. But then I found out why he was like that, though. He saw his sister get killed in front of him. Like in the car, she was in the car and she got shot up in front of him. Now, all these other teachers don't know this, right? I know this because I like to get involved in students that are like, what's triggering you?
Mhm.
What's the that
Mhm.
you're responding like this, right? And when I found that out, I'm like, oh,
There's usually a backstory.
yeah. And you're like, ooh.
Everyone has a story.
And and so that's what I try to relate to my students. I have a story. You have
Yeah.
a story. We all have it terrible in life sometimes, right? And I'm not telling you that that's the way life is always going to be,
Right.
but there's sometimes we have to have tough skin. And this happened at a soccer game. I tell my parents and I try to explain it to them. You can't always be there for them. You have to sometimes prepare them and let them grow,
Yeah.
because like, we were at a soccer game, and I'm a little older now because I used to be the yeller and the screamer. You know, he kind of mature. I'm very outgoing, very, you know,
Okay.
positive. I cheer my team on. And this last game, the ref was letting these kids just get hit hard. I mean, hard. And the parents,
Oh.
they were cursing, and the ref was like, "You go." They couldn't do anything. They were helpless, seeing their kids get literally beat up in front of us.
Wow.
And the parents are getting up and they're cursing. And they're like, oh, the ref, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, they have to stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
If they're getting hit, they're going to have to start hitting back sometimes, because this is life.
I
There's
don't
not
know.
going to
I'd be yelling at the ref too.
be, no, but what I tell my, like,
Yeah.
what happens when you're not there?
Right. Oh, I know. They need to self-advocate. I
And,
believe they need to learn how to self-advocate.
and
Yeah.
I tell our parents, these are the times that you have to tell them to toughen up,
Yeah.
because
Well,
there's,
but it really does come down to self-advocate. Like if I'm a student of yours and I say, you know, Mr. Hernandez, I am not a test taker. You can see I've failed the past 3 tests. Is there some other thing I could do to prove to you that I know this information?
so I'll give you an example of what I do with those kids, right? So I keep, when it comes to a quiz, I let them do open, right? But when it comes to a test, because I know they get anxiety, and I tell them, listen, I can get your grade up. The grade's not the problem, but the test will be a problem, because at the end of the EOC, I'm not going to take it for you. Your parents are not going to take it for you. It's you, right? So we have to accept that at the end, you do have to pass this test. Now, when it comes to grades, don't worry about it. So one thing I do with them is I make them create their own problems,
Oh, I love that.
because
That's a good one.
the way I explain it, because I'll give them like their homework, which I try to give cut homework, because I realized after doing more research that homework really doesn't, you know, it's not for everybody. It might be for the advanced kids, but not everybody. And even then, some kids don't have time.
Yeah.
But I give them like 4 problems and they have to create it. And I tell them, well, why would I teach you how to tell time? But if I show you how to build a watch, you're going to learn how to tell time.
Hmm.
So I'd rather you build a watch,
I love that.
you know, because you're going to figure out how to tell time later. But
Yeah. I've been thinking the SATs if they were customized to things that interest students, like my daughter used to have a slime business,
Mhm.
and she could tell you formulas and what she did and, the right chemistry. She gave a
I
presentation instead of a test.
admit, like, one of the things conservatives trying to push is vocational diplomas. I am wholeheartedly, not everybody's meant to go to college.
Yeah, it's true.
Some people are just, they're entrepreneurs. And I tell them,
Yeah.
listen, at least go to graduate. Because they're like, why do we need school? Like, because it gives you foundation.
Right. I would say graduate high school. I mean, there
Yeah.
are some very well-known people, including, let's say, Steven Spielberg, right? He
Mhm.
never went to college. I think he did something after, but years later.
No,
But
I
look
think,
at the filmmaking, you know?
but most people that are successful go to college and then they drop out.
It's true. It's true.
Uh,
Listen, we
the-
have to wrap up soon, but there's one last thing I want to ask you.
Mhm.
How do you see we're going to get out of this mental health pandemic?
It's either going to collapse and then we're finally going to do something about it. I
Who's,
honestly,
and who's we?
the teachers. I don't
Teachers or
think,
the policymakers?
no, teachers.
Okay.
Um, so I honestly, I'm starting to feel this, like,
Okay.
there is no advocation for striking or anything like that, right?
Mhm.
There is nothing there, but I'm very, I perceive emotions and very good at just being with my kids
Okay.
and talking to a lot of teachers from all over. They're at that point where if you ask us to carry guns, I think it's going to be a big, big problem
Hmm.
because we're at that, you know what, enough's enough.
Yeah.
Enough's enough. And the ones that are, and this is what I tell my teachers right now, like, we're the ones that made it through. We're the ones that are sticking out the pandemic. We're sticking out we're getting, I mean, everybody else's salaries going up.
Yeah.
And teachers are still making, we had secretaries making $10 an hour last year.
I want to see teachers make as much as sports players.
Oh, well, that will never happen.
I know it won't, but
Sadly.
that's where we prioritize.
So I
Sports.
think, so once we get the communities involved at a local level,
Mhm.
that's when parent involvement and class sizes, in my opinion, are the biggest things to education. Because I don't care how amazing of a teacher you are, if you have 160 kids, you can't reach all of them.
Yeah.
And, but I honestly think that the way to get out, it's either going to be a mental collapse. And I mean, if you talk about the school industry, I mean, Polk County in my school is the largest employer of teachers. They're the largest employers, the education
Wow.
system here. So if you take the education system and people are like, well, they think we're just replaceable. We're not. Nobody wants to do this for $47,000 a year.
No.
Nobody wants to do this. Like, you really got to have a love for it. And then once you get in, if you realize that it's a skeleton crew, you're not going to be able to sustain working with, you think you're going to go in with 20 kids and you go in with 30.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize it's too much and you quit. You can go work somewhere else, making $55,000 a year, $65,000, and not have to deal with the children's well-being. That's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
But honestly, in a positive way, the way, in my opinion, because it's an opinion, right? Nobody really has the way out of this. This is something new that we had never experienced. And mental health, I honestly don't know when in history. I mean, maybe during the Kellogg's days when he was trying to cure, all these other diseases of women, supposedly. But I think mental health right now, the only way out is parents understanding it's okay to seek help.
Mm.
I think it's our generation, the one that got, I don't want to say beat up, but had the growth bumps.
Yeah.
Because I feel our generation, we had to, parents used to say, well, when you were little, you weren't this. Well, when we were little, we played outside.
Right.
We didn't get home till night, so you didn't have to deal with us all day long.
There were no phones, no, yeah.
There were no phones. So the only way to contact is we better get home.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew the neighborhood. We all knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to work 2 jobs most of the time. Most parents didn't back then. Now most parents work 2 jobs.
Yeah.
It's so stressful to be a parent and a teacher and a provider.
Right.
But I think parents understanding that mental health is a real thing and allowing kids, or not just allowing, but honestly supporting children to have someone to talk to.
Definitely.
just, when I got the divorce, or when, first thing I took my kids, I made them go to therapy,
Good.
and they
Good.
hated it. And what for? I go, you need to talk to someone that's not in the middle, that doesn't know.
Exactly. Someone objective. Yeah.
And the first
Yeah.
time, they hated it, and when they leave, they feel good.
Good.
Take them, and they hate it when
Good.
they leave. Good.
And they can do it throughout their lifetime as needed.
And that's the main reason I try to teach my kids the way I wish my parents would have taught me. I'm very open with them. The first day they had the sex talk, I talked to them. But I think that's what it is. It's mental health, opening up. I'm trying to convince my oldest brother to see therapy, and he's like, man, I got to see someone. I'm like, yes.
Definitely.
Do.
Now's
So
the time.
I think our generation speaking more about it and being more positive about it, and that's the way, in my opinion, to get it out there, because it doesn't matter what religion, what race, what politics you are. Mental health
Right.
affects all of us.
You bet. I want to thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Thanks for taking
Thank you.
the
I
time.
apologize.
Apologize for what?
Just rambling. I know I get into so many things.
No, you were great.